Okay. Can you hear me again? Yeah. Okay. So let's start from where we were, which is we had kind of shown to some extent that we have some notion of security for this specific available chain protocol, LMD Ghost. What was missing was it's not yet in the Sleepy model. We were assuming just synchrony and not full fluctuating participation, and it does not work with committees. And so this we haven't shown yet, but it turns out that it's basically for the same reason. And the reason is basically, so if you remember, this was kind of trying to show that how we get reorg resilience, or generally this like sticky property of LMD Ghost, that we have like a majority of good weight on one side, and then we stick to that side. Now the problem is that once we consider the honest weight voting at a certain slot, and we have committees, or we are in the Sleepy model, so there might be a sleep validators, we don't have the same picture as before. So this really relied on this being a majority. And now we don't have a majority anymore because we might have some asleep validators that voted somewhere else in the past, and they cannot change their vote because they're asleep. Or we could have committees, and so you could have the adversarial weight of this slot, but also of the previous slot, or even like slots before. And so this kind of tells you, okay, at least like the argument doesn't carry out in the same way once we have those factors. And in fact, it turns out that, so in both cases, the answer is, yeah, it's not just that the argument doesn't work. You can actually come up with attacks. For the committee thing, I'll just quickly show the specific attack just to give you like a bit of intuition. So yeah, imagine we have committees. So in this case, it's still latest message, but in this case, it's like the latest message of this committee, the latest message of this committee, because they're disjoint. So both of them will count at the same time, and same for the adversary, and that's kind of the crucial thing. So this is a sort of like selfish mining type thing. So the adversary will like withhold its blocks, and it will withhold its votes. So the honest people will only see this, and they will presume that D is the head of the chain. And then the adversary reveals everything, like this other branch and the associated weights. And I mean, in this case, the numbers are such that it's a tie, but let's say that this wins the tiebreaker and we get a reorg. And the reason it's very simple is just that the adversary can accumulate weight over time, basically. So this is purely just because of this committee thing. And so that this tells you, okay, we have some kind of notional security, but it doesn't hold with committees, and it has some problems potentially with sleepiness, which in fact it does. And so Goldfish was a protocol that was basically meant to like overcome these properties, but on the foundation of LMD Ghost. So as another kind of small tweak on LMD Ghost. And what it does is, so remember we had LMD Ghost at first, then we added view merge, we got some notion of security. Now we add this other piece, that's vote expiry. So we have the same structure. This is still LMD Ghost with view merge as before. Now the difference is that we only care about votes from the previous slot. So at this point, when we evaluate the fourth choice, we're only going to use the votes from slot T-1, so the previous slot. And then the votes from T will be used in the next slot. So yeah, basically at slot T+1, the only votes that mattered were these. At this slot, the only votes that matter are these. And yeah, basically what this does is exactly resolve the problem that we had before, that the votes from previous committees don't matter, like these are expired, we don't care about them. Asleep validators also don't matter because they're in the past, so expired. And so we kind of resolve what seemed to be the problem. And like one way to think about Goldfish as a protocol is that it's kind of like a relay race happening, where in every slot, a committee kind of hands off to the next committee the signal on what's going on with the protocol, basically. So in a way, what these votes are doing is just pointing out to what is for them the canonical chain, and they kind of communicate this information to the next ones and to the next ones. And after this is forgotten. So once the handoff is over, then these guys are kind of gone. And we don't even need to think about this as committees. We can also think about it as like in every slot, there's just like a completely different set of validators that shows up. Like you can think about it in the Sleepy model that these are now the awake ones, and these were the ones that were awake before. You could think about it as committees, or just think about it as like every slot, a new fully new validator set just shows up. And the only thing that they know is what the previous committee gives them. And as it turns out, this is actually exactly the same kind of thing that protocols like the ones that we showed before, like this, I don't remember what it's called, but yeah, those other protocols based on time-shifted quorum like really do like very similar things to this. And reorg resilience, becomes very simple. It's really the same picture as we had before. It's just that now we have kind of cleared up this other stuff by expiring it. Basically how, again, you can think about it in this like relay kind of way, where like the signal gets relayed correctly to the next slot, even if we have some adversarial validators, because we have a majority. So if these ones are all pointing to the same thing or to the same subtree, then that signal goes through, and these ones will also be pointing to the same subtree. So we'll kind of restore this fact that the honest votes for a slot are a majority, and they can like determine the fourth choice by themselves. And so that's the good side of what vote expiry does. There is a bad side, which is this lack of asynchrony resilience, we'll call it. And again, let's look at this relay picture. So everything is going fine. We have synchrony. The signal keeps going through. We have honest majority. At some point, something breaks down. Maybe there's like a network, like there's turbulence in a network, whatever. The synchrony bound is not met for one slot. For like a very short period of time, something goes wrong. Now you could say, okay, that's out of the model. Like we're working the sleepy model, that's just not in the model. It's fine if things break down. That's true in some sense, but the issue here is that here what happens is a really catastrophic breakdown. So because this kind of handoff doesn't happen, the signal that goes through to the next slot comes entirely from the adversarial validators. And so the adversarial validators basically get a chance to just like erase everything that happened before them and just do, for example, this like very long reorg. They get to just like rewrite history. So it's not just that, oh, the protocol is now unsafe, or the protocol is not live temporarily because we don't have synchrony. It's this like catastrophic failure that just destroys everything that happened before in the protocol. So that's kind of, it's not, you can't just say that, oh, it's out of the model, so we don't care. And so yeah, in fact, we do care, and it's basically the reason that we're not okay with using this kind of protocol standalone. And this basically, again, goes exactly the same for some of these other protocols that I showed before that rely on this different synchronization technique, this time-shifted quorum technique. They have the same exact failure mode, it turns out, which is quite unfortunate. So it's unfortunate, but it's actually not very surprising. We can think about it as, what does dynamic availability require of us? It basically requires us to make decisions with whoever is there. So, in this situation, the people that are there, as far as we can see, are just these ones, and so they get to make the decision, basically. If we really want to like make sure that we are live all the time under like full fluctuation of the participation. But asynchronous resilience, of course, demands something different. It demands that we hold on to like past decisions. So these things are not actually fully incompatible, but there's definitely some tension there. In a way, it's pretty similar to the availability finality dilemma. But in this case, we're not even, so when we say asynchronous resilience here, we don't mean asynchronous safety. It's not that we want finality. We don't want to be resilient to like endless period of asynchrony. We want to be resilient at least to temporary ones. Like we want, there may be for a slot or 10 slots or some bounded period that we define, there is asynchrony, then it doesn't cause this like catastrophic collapse. And we want the available chain itself to have this property, so without this finality gadget on top. And the reason is basically that even if we're in a regime where the finality gadget cannot work, in the regime where we actually care about an available chain, because if we're finalizing, we just don't care about the available chain, we just have the finality gadget working. So if we're in that regime, we don't want to have this like very fragile protocol. Like we still want the protocol that has enough kind of robustness, let's say. I guess a small note about this, it might feel like longest chain so longest chain, again, it's a protocol that is dynamically available fully in the Sleepy model, but it also has some kind of asynchronous resilience. It doesn't just like collapse, and you don't get to just like rewrite the whole chain for a small moment of asynchrony. The reason is that it doesn't actually do this making new decisions fast. It makes decisions pretty slowly. So it doesn't it's not that, there's a small period of asynchrony, new people show up and they get to rewrite the history. It takes time for the protocol to make decisions, and so it also takes time to undo them, basically. And
but if you do have like a half hour of asynchrony, then you can like roll back
half hour, yeah. So it has this sort of it's kind of like linear response to the period of asynchrony. Like you can only rewrite more or less as much as the period of asynchrony that you have. So yeah, if you had years, you could rewrite years of Bitcoin history, for example, if you had, well, the hash power to do it as well. But
okay, but the property you want is that if there's like a half hour of asynchrony, then I can basically erase the last half hour of the...
Yeah, so in principle, it's, I don't want to say it too precisely because, so that I think would be fine. Like I personally think that would be like a good enough version of asynchronous resilience. But for example, you can get something that in some ways stronger, in some ways weaker with these kind of protocols where it's more like, for example, you can say up to 10 minutes, you cannot reorg anything, but after 10 minutes, everything collapses. And so maybe that's another definition that's fine, where it's more like there's a max period of asynchrony that we can tolerate, but we can tolerate it fully. Unlike longest chain, where it's more like elastic in how it deals with periods of asynchrony. I think both of these could be fine potentially as definitions of asynchrony resilience. That's okay for us. So I don't know that I would say like, oh, that one is not good, but this one is good. But basically, yeah, I think broadly speaking, we want some kind of like response that's not just, tiny period of asynchrony implies full collapse. I think anything that's more reasonable than that could do here.
Yeah, question on this. So you have the checkpoint, right? So you cannot rewrite the checkpoint at the last one you made.
Yeah, so if we finalize something that this doesn't apply, it's just that maybe we're not finalizing and we still don't want the chain to be super frail, basically.
The question is the other direction. So if you don't create the next checkpoint, does this protocol stop producing blocks?
No, it would keep producing blocks.
And the checkpoints will be just postponed for...
Yeah, it's kind of, ideally it's like once there's back synchrony and full participation, you can create new checkpoints immediately, more or less. I mean, that would be the ideal case.
But you create several checkpoints?
You can create one that checkpoints the whole past. Okay, so then...
Sorry, actually, it's a bit tricky. Like, if you think even about Bitcoin, right? Sure, it works with the sleepy model. So let's say now there's like a year of like 1% of the hash. Now there's a period of asynchrony of like 1/100th of a year. But with all the hash, I can like basically like, so it's not half hour and half hour.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like half hour in the worst case of the sleepiness of the previous half hour, whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get what you want. Like, if you want.
Well, so longest chain cannot. Maybe I think you're right that actually it is weaker in the sense than I thought. But so these protocols that are still vote based, they can do something that's at least quite a bit stronger than what was previously there.
Okay.
And
I'd actually be surprised if you're claiming these can do better than like proof of work.
no, it's not better because still you have this kind of fixed window where like after the window everything collapses. So like whereas proof of work or longest chain doesn't have any such window. Like it's always like to some extent elastic, I guess, the extent of the damage. Whereas here, like if you do go beyond the window, everything is you have nothing left basically. But you can extend the window, like you can fix the window in the protocol to be quite large. So yeah, I mean basically very simply the idea is just to say, okay, we have this thing with vote expiry where we only count the votes from the previous slot. Let's make this a parameter. Let's say, okay, that instead of the previous slot, we say we count eta slots. And so at slot T, we use the votes from the previous like eta slots. And so Goldfish would just be this protocol instantiated with eta equals 1, so only the previous slot. LMD Ghost would be this thing, and we call it R LMD Ghost because it's R for recent, like the eta recent. And would be with eta equals infinity, so where we count all the votes, there's no expiry at all. And basically the trade-off that we get is that when we increase eta, we get more asynchronous resilience. Like now there's like a longer period of votes they were counting for this latest message rule. And so, for example, let's say that 3 slots ago I was online, I sent a message. Now I go away for 10 slots, but eta is 20 slots. Now my message will still be counted. That will be my latest message. It will be a bit old, but it will still anchor, like kind of give my signal to whatever the chain was at that point in my view. And so yeah, basically increasing eta just means more resilience. Like a small period of asynchrony that's less than eta does not cause full collapse, but it then makes the protocol less dynamically available. So it means that if there's fluctuating participation within this period, then we can still have the problems that we had before when we didn't have vote expiry. So, I mean, you take it to the extreme, you have LMD ghost, which again does not tolerate committees and does not fully deal well with sleepiness. And
latency scaling with ADA?
No.
In Nakamoto consensus, if you vary the KD, right? In Nakamoto consensus, if you vary the KD, right, you get a trade-off between asynchrony, resilience, and sort of latency, while keeping tolerance to full fluctuation.
Do you mean because if you like locally stick to the things that you confirmed?
No, just saying like you can rewrite a certain length of the chain if you have asynchrony, but like the longer asynchrony takes, the more you get to rewrite. So the larger your K is, the safer.
Oh, the safe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of what you can rewrite, but it's the same, but the safety violation will be different. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, here no, it's it doesn't have this relation. Yeah, so basically, yeah, what I said already, periods of asynchrony up to eta slots, they're kind of fine. They don't really cause problems. The bad part is that this fluctuation is kind of what we were trying to remove with vote expiry, so it has its own like negative consequences. It basically just means that we have to be a bit more restricted than the sleepy model. We call it like eta sleepy model or something like that, where it's basically you have to reason about fluctuations within this period and think about who's asleep, but sort of out of the scope of this talk. But it's not like it's not weakening or strengthening the sleepy model too much in what you require. And okay, well, yeah, those are the two extremes, but it doesn't matter too much. So yeah, and we kind of have this overall picture where we have RLMD Ghost as this kind of family of protocols that are view merge based as the synchronization mechanism. We're at one extreme of asynchrony resilience. We have LMD Ghost, which actually, again, it can even have asynchronous safety. Goldfish has no asynchrony resilience. It has this full collapse. But on the other hand, dynamic availability is the opposite. So LMD Ghost is not dynamically available. Goldfish is dynamically available fully. And then here we have like a spectrum of that. And then for time-shifted quorum, this other synchronization mechanism, we have the same thing where MMR, this is one of the protocols that was on the slide from Malky, Momoz, and Ren. It's kind of like Goldfish. It has the same collapse under asynchrony, but it is dynamically available. And then this TOBSVD is just like a family of protocols that we introduce as a generalization of this that kind of does the same function as RLMD Ghost in creating this like spectrum of outcomes, basically. And yeah, so one thing that it's not obvious, but it turns out to be the case, at least for these protocols, is that only Ds at the very bottom of this like spectrum support committees. The reason is basically that ex ante reorg attack that I showed before, that like as soon as this eta is more than 1, you can do at least some level of this like selfish mining kind of withholding of votes. And so at least it creates some problems as soon as you like move up here a little bit. And so ideally we would want to have support for committees, and so this is a bit of a bummer. And one idea was to basically take these two kind of, take this and some other element of this family, or this and some other element of this family, or mix and matching, and do a sort of ebb and flow like construction, but without a finality gadget, like just to add this asynchrony resilience property, but a very similar kind of, essentially checkpointing type of construction, where the kind of more, the protocol higher up in the hierarchy will checkpoint the one that has the asynchrony resilience problem, basically. And yeah, so that's kind of the idea that we're kind of thinking about as a way to get all of these properties and still have committee support, which it's something that we feel like might be necessary. And so yeah, some of the open questions I think on the available chain side are, can we do this in a simpler way, where like we don't need this kind of mix into two things construction, but still have committee support and asynchrony resilience. Another one is like on the latency cost. So both of them are on the latency cost. So one is like all these protocols, view merge, time shifted quorum, they cause some latency cost for this synchronization. Do we need that? That's sort of unclear. It seems like we probably do, but. And then same question for confirmation. So we didn't kind of talk about this too much, but if we want constant latency, which again we didn't talk about, we just talked about the kappa deep rule, even if it's not constant latency. But if we do want this so far we're paying like a delta for that as well. Like, and yeah, so another question is like, do we need to pay this delta, or can we do without that? And then yeah, let's kind of shift gear to the finality gadget. So I'll kind of go through a bit of I want to say like how the finality gadget is actually interacting with the rest of the system in a few ways. So a bit of like, yeah, system level perspective on the finality gadget. There's a lot of things there, so we're not going to be able to cover not even close to everything, but I'll try to at least just give you like a taste of some of the things that unintuitively like you have to think about as you deal with the finality gadget. So just briefly recapping like what Yann already said, so we have these two, again, sleepy model, partially synchronous model. Now we're kind of working on this side of the world. And yeah, we had already a bit of like preview Casper 5G, so I'm not gonna talk about it too deeply, but remember just like this symbol is for finality, this symbol is for justification, which is kind of the first lock that you get before finalizing. Yeah, we have basically the objects that the finality gadget works on are these checkpoints that are block and epoch pairs, but I'll just represent them as blocks. Don't have to really think about it too deeply. The votes are these links, like these like source and target link, and it's basically saying, I know that this thing is justified, I want to finalize it, and I want to justify the new thing, basically. Supermajority link is when you have 2/3 of the stake, and finality is when you have a link of length 1. So like this would not finalize, but this would finalize the previous thing. And so the probably the most important thing about a finality gadget is just the definition of what you cannot do essentially when voting, like the rules that ensure safety. And they're basically just these two. One is equivocation, which is that we'll take like horizontally to mean the time or epochs. So these are kind of two votes that end up in the same epoch, but vote for two different things. So this is what equivocation means, just, yeah. You're only supposed to vote once per epoch, you're doing it twice. This is a clear kind of slashable offense. And then surround voting is a bit less intuitive. You can see this red vote is surrounded by this one in the sense that the source is prior to this one and the target is afterwards. And basically this violates the voting rule that your source, like the source of your votes, should only move forward. The reason is basically that you're saying by sending this vote at this point in time, you're saying, I know that this is justified, and there's kind of no reason for you to then route your vote into something earlier. Like once you say that you know that it is justified, you're only supposed to use sources that are higher than this one. And violating these rules is basically the only way that you can skip a finalization and end up justifying something, a higher checkpoint. So you can see that, for example, this is finalized, but we end up justifying something higher through this equivocation. Or here, this is finalized, but we end up skipping it this way. Like the surround thing kind of literally lets us like jump over it, basically, and justify something conflicting at a higher epoch.
And try to understand these errors. So, so the source is what you're voting on, and
actually the target is what you're voting on. So this is what you're saying. You know, I want to create the first certificate for this. Like this doesn't have any certificate, and you're saying like we should try to get a certificate here. And here you're saying the source. You're saying I know that there's already a certificate there. You're kind of confirming that you know that there's a certificate, and so you're trying to finalize it. It's like basically this is like the second round of voting in PVFT essentially.
Yeah, just a question. So we call that one amnesia, and that actually amnesia, so you forget the lock that you had.
Yeah, exactly.
But are the arrows blue and red in the right order here?
What do you mean?
The colors of the.
So the colors are just to say this is the violation. Like these are the two votes that are doing the slashing violation. Like in this case, these are the votes that are, well, this is surrounding this one, and these are the two votes that are equivocating. Okay, so yeah, that's a quick introduction. Now let's look at like the basically I think, a key building block of how we use the finality gadget, which is the state transition. So it's basically this function that takes a state and a block and updates the state. So we'll start somewhere with a block and the genesis state, and then whenever a new block comes, we'll run the state transition to produce a new state and just keep like moving on with the chain. And the state transition is actually where a lot of the interesting stuff happens with respect to the finality gadget. So in particular, so all of it is kind of, all these things are kind of bound to a specific chain, basically, and to its state. So in particular, the validator set, it's contained in the state, and there's no kind of sense in which there's a global validator set. There's only the validator set of a specific state, and each chain will update it as the state updates. So each chain will have its own kind of different view of what the validator set is. And this kind of goes for slashing as well. Like slashing is just like a way to modify the validator set in a sense, like to change the balances and who is actually in the set or not. So slashing is also like operates at this level of a specific chain and its state. And then finality as well, like finality, justification, all of these things that we kind of talked about in the previous slides, they all operate purely at the level of the state. So what does it mean for have to have this green check mark? It means that there's a state in which there is this green check mark. So this is kind of just a way to say a state exists somewhere on this chain that has done this finalization processing for this. And so there's a few properties that are purely just things that happen in the state. There are purely properties of how we write the state transition. So there's like kind of a very minimal logic to check in that these properties are correct. And one is, for example, accountable safety. So it's this property that if two conflicting blocks are finalized, then we have this evidence to slash a third of the stake. And again, it's purely a property of the state transition function, because finalization happens here in the state transition function, and slashing happens there as well. And yeah, basically, if we have such a thing like conflicting finalization, then we know that these blocks where this happens will contain this slashing evidence. But that was kind of a simplified story, because when we say slash a third of the stake, we're not really saying something precise, because again, stake doesn't really have a global meaning. The only sense in which there's stake is there is stake on a specific chain in a specific state. And so we have to think about, okay, what does it mean to actually slash a third of the stake? And precisely actually what it means is that once we have a dynamic validator set, is this kind of statement that if two blocks are finalized, two conflicting blocks are finalized within a certain time in epochs from their kind of highest common ancestor, so the latest time that they share the state together. So at first they were kind of at the same validator set, the same state. Then we can slash, instead of a third, we now say a third of the stake here in the common ancestor, but discounted by some decay factor, basically. So it's a third of this stake specifically, but as time goes on, it kind of decays as the validator set diverge from each other. And this decay depends on how much do we actually allow the validator set to change on each chain. Like basically the bounds that the state transition function puts on the validator set change, which is basically the way that Ethereum manages this problem. Like we obviously don't want this delta to be such that the decay makes the safety go to zero in 1 hour or 2 minutes or even a day. We kind of would like this to operate at the level of like weeks or months. And so the way that this stake can change, the validator set can change, is regulated based on this, essentially. And again, this is purely a property of the state transition function. And
Did you say is that the primary reason for the metering on the execute?
For what?
For the metering on the execute for stakers, is this the primary reason?
The execute. Yes, yeah, is the primary reason. Yes, both on the execute and also on the entry queue. They have different limits, but both of them kind of contribute to calculating this delta, and they're kind of set with that in mind.
Sorry, you have an unbound period?
So there is a period that's called weak subjectivity period, and it's about 2 weeks right now. And what it is defined to is 10% safety decay. So going from like 33% to 23%, it's a completely arbitrary thing, but yeah, in 2 weeks you kind of lose 10% of safety.
That suggests that in 2 weeks you are seeing misbehavior of the guy before.
Yeah, like 2 weeks is kind of like, okay, there's like some synchrony assumption there in some sense, and also assumption of like social coordination and things like that. Then, so there's another kind of accountability, which I'm putting in brackets because it's very much not formal in any way. Well, the kind that we have here, and there's actual, formal definitions of this that, this doesn't really potentially satisfy. But so there's this idea of inactivity leak that's quite unique to Ethereum, and it's basically saying that if we're not finalizing, then we want to punish the validators that are causing us not to finalize, which is a bit tricky to define, of course. But it's not tricky to define from the perspective of a chain. So from the outside, it's tricky. Like, who is causing us not to finalize? It means there's some idea of like synchrony that you can actually tell who is voting, who is not voting, why they're voting a certain way. From the perspective of a certain chain, it doesn't matter. You just get some votes, and you know whether they're correct or not from your perspective, and timely. And then you make your kind of conclusions based on that. And again, inactivity leak operates purely at this level. So on a given chain, there's only a single correct vote that you can make, which is the one that has the source being the latest justified on this chain, and the target being the epoch boundary block, but let's just say the canonical target on that chain for this epoch. And if you don't vote correctly, you get leaked. And that's kind of all there is to it from the perspective of this chain.
I always thought that this needs to live on the NMD ghosts. I mean, because otherwise, how can you like? So somebody didn't vote if you.
Right. Yes. Sorry. Maybe this was a bit confusing, but yeah, when I say chain, I actually do always mean the beacon chain, which it's the LMD ghost chain. Let's say. So there's only we've been talking about two chains for this ebb and flow thing, but it's really just one chain that has checkpoints. So there's the beacon chain that has this state transition and all of these things, and then it finalizes things on itself, and then you externally can observe that and say, okay, I derive from that a prefix. That would be like the finalized chain. But what I'm showing here isn't the finality chain, is just the chain that people observe. Does that make sense? Like, basically think of it as like there's a single beacon chain that keeps updating every slot, and then you always try to find the head of it with LMD ghost. And on that chain, there's also a notion of finality.
Like, if we want to record that Yann is leaking, that gets recorded on a block?
Yeah, it gets recorded in a block and in the state associated to that block at the very tip of the chain.
You have people to vote on it, because otherwise, otherwise I can just say Yann is leaking.
Well, from the perspective, like the chain doesn't know how many people are voting for it. It just knows it exists, and it knows if it's finalized. It's just that once we think about, we're running a for choice to figure out what is actually the canonical chain, then we get to what you're saying, which is like, if someone makes like a random chain that no one votes for, where Yann is being leaked, that shouldn't actually affect the world, because
I'm confused. Like, how do you? What's the rule for like writing down the statement?
So on a chain, on a given chain, on a given state, is just which votes show up in a certain epoch. Like, if Yann's vote didn't show up, then he gets leaked, and that's it. There's no.
The votes are all recorded on chain. Is that?
I see.
So.
But like the chain doesn't care if it's like 50% of the votes or.
Chain, they're not finalized.
No, I mean eventually they're finalized, but.
So they're recorded on this energy ghost chain.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So basically, if basically everybody's censoring Yann, then he gets leaked.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, for example, if there's like a malicious majority, in principle, they can create a chain where all the other people get leaked. And there's no way to prevent that.
But in this way, you can be very lazy, right? You wait up everyone to vote, just copy the votes you see, and then...
There's other things around incentives like timeliness rewards, but the leak is a bit different.
Okay, there is a canonical finalization set of votes, right? So
yeah.
So it's equal, everyone knows the same set.
Yeah. It's just that all these rules are processed on each chain. Like each chain will process the same set of rules, but based on its own local context.
I guess to me it's always like, okay, the blue people want to splinter out of the red people, and the blue people will like write their own blocks that don't have any red people voting, right? They can censor so then they will leak, so you have like the blue are leaking the red and make the red are leaking the blue.
Okay, this actually I thought I skipped, okay. Yeah, and so that was about what happens in a state, and it was until now just like a single chain. Now, of course, we don't have a single chain, we have like a bunch of, you have a block tree, we have votes, and we have to figure out what is the canonical chain. And so this is the level that we call the four-choice store, which is where like a node has this set of chains and their states. So each of these chains has, again, a state that they get through the state transition function, and it has LMD ghost votes, plus the finality information that these chains provide. So again, when I say this is finalized, it means it's finalized somewhere here. So one of these chains must have finalized it. But from the perspective of this four-choice store, at the end of the day, what you care about is just that, okay, somewhere it's finalized, I treat it as finalized, and then I run my for choice using these LMD ghost votes. And then maybe I end up here, maybe I end up here, and then I will only care about the state of the place where I end up, basically. Now, specifically, actually, we don't run the for choice starting from finalized. Yann kind of previewed this. We run the for choice starting from the justified checkpoint. So we have like this latest finalized, latest justified, and then the head of the chain. And to get to the head of the chain, we restrict ourselves to this subtree, like the subtree that stems from the justified. And then we run LMD ghost on this subtree. And there's a lot of our details of like, what are the balances that we're using? Like here, these are votes, but the votes need to be weighted by balances. What are we using? So there's more to this, but this is kind of most of the picture at least. Yeah, so we enforce basically that the head must always descend from justified. And it turns out also this descendance that finalized or justified descends from finalized, it's always the case if we don't have a 1/3 /in violation. And even if it's not, there's some other things that we do to make sure that we don't end up kind of forgetting about finalizations. But yeah, this is kind of the most like normal behavior. And so one thing that's quite important, but maybe normally not something that people think about too much, is that locally, so we don't actually locally rely in some sense on this 1/3 assumption for, like, once we see that something is finalized, we're never willing to revert it. Even if it turns out that something conflicting gets finalized, we're not willing to kind of even entertain that there might be something else out there. And how we do this is that we literally reject anything that conflicts with a thing that we finalized locally. So yeah, for example, this new block comes once we finalize, we reject it. We can even prune everything that conflicts with it. And we can even prune old blocks, like ancestors and states of what's finalized. So basically, as we keep moving finality forward, we forget about the past and we forget about anything like messy that might be out there. This is like, it has kind of two purposes. Like one is like to really make finality a very strong, like as strong as it can be in some sense, like to where even if you break it, it doesn't mean that you can freely just get people to, like, let's say that I somehow finalize this one later, you don't want people to like just jump from here to here or like have the choice. Like they should, once they've seen this, they should be stuck there no matter what, basically. The other reason is that if we don't do this pruning, so if we actually kind of treat finality as like, okay, we could still maybe like end up somewhere else if there's something weird happening, non-finality becomes, if you don't do this pruning, like this is a big performance problem for clients. It means that there's all these states that you have to care about. It means that if votes come to here, you have to think about them, you have to process them, and this requires like thinking about these states and so on. And so this is actually one of the reasons that it's not obvious, but it's really basically the main reason why when we don't finalize, clients tend to struggle a lot. So like they tend to have performance issues. Like basically Yann like talked about a lot of these like non-finality situations, and they tend to like a bit spiral into bigger things because of these reasons that like we lose pruning, and then this causes like performance issues to clients. And then so this is the other reason that I kind of already a bit mentioned, which is that from the perspective of like what does finality mean to a node, it basically if like most of the network sees a certain block as finalized, so let's say this F, not only it's been finalized, but most people have seen it, they're kind of locked on it in a very strong sense. Like it doesn't matter if 1/3 the like kind of BFT assumptions are violated. Maybe again this is finalized. There's a slashing violation, whatever. This is finalized. People will not just abandon their previous finalization. And so this means that if you, for example, see a finalization and then wait a little bit, like maybe you wait a few minutes, whatever your assumptions on the world are for synchrony, you're pretty sure that even if the whole validator set is corrupted, this finalization should not be reverted. The reason being that there's not just a validator set. There's like, maybe he runs a node. His node is going to see the finalization and lock on it locally. And basically, you're not going to be able to get the whole world to like jump with you on the other chain like 10 minutes later or 1 day later, depending on what your synchrony assumptions are. So there's kind of a bit of like you can strengthen what finality means if you make some synchrony assumptions on it, but this like local locking is in a way how you actually do it. And
excuse me, just a question, if you can return that. But what are you saying works the opposite direction, right? So the guys that finalize the branch, they create a fork, right?
Yeah. So I had another slide which I hid, which was that if you do this like kind of at the same time, then yes, you can get people to get deadlocked. And we kind of accept this. Like we're fine with in this case that it's better that the only way to restart the system is manual intervention, but we have this stronger notion of safety basically.
Yeah. The second thing is from his question was this is kind of like Solana, right? So you're putting votes on the blocks. So what are the incentives and how? I mean, do they pay fees too?
Yeah, votes pay fees, and there's like
something very strong there.
Sorry, not fees, but votes pay rewards. Like they like get printed, minted ETH, and there's sort of incentive mechanisms to how these rewards are organized. Like there is, if the votes are too late, they don't get paid. There's sort of a whole thing there. I can't really get into the details, but it's not. There's at least like I think a decent amount of thought to how people are rewarded and why to try to incentivize the right behavior. It's not perfect. It's pretty hard to get it like fully right, but there's more than a few rules there.
Because otherwise it's the same problems for Bitcoin, right? You can have a partition, 2 guys only record the votes of one side, the other guys only record votes of the other side.
Yeah, I mean, so this can still happen no matter what the rewards are. But I think the rewards, I would think about them more as like incentivizing normal good behavior as opposed to trying to solve like, really catastrophic type of situations. Just a quick, so it's supposed to end in 30 minutes or what's the final time? Was it 4 was a, okay. Okay. Yeah, okay, so quickly going back to weak subjectivity, now they have these ideas about the force choice store. So in a way, I told you weak subjectivity is like only a property of the, or like accountable safety is only a property of this state transition. But yeah, now that we have these like ideas of how the store works, you can see that if you, for example, build a private chain to try to exploit the finality decay, or sorry, the safety decay, so you like wait a while safety is decaying because of the passage of time to try to eventually do a conflicting finalization. This is not going to work because sure, you eventually do a conflicting finalization, but again, it's kind of too late for it to matter. Like by this time, people have seen, for example, this block, and they're not going to go to your chain. So 2 weeks later, you can just show up with a new finalization and hope that it's going to affect the world. And yeah, the rough idea is basically that the danger of conflicting finalizations decays as they're revealed farther apart from each other. So because of this lock-in thing, like in this case, the finalizations are revealed at the same time. This is very bad because what he said can happen that 2 nodes end up like, one node ends up on this side of the world, another node ends up on this side of the world, and they can never get back together, basically. So the danger is very high, and it might even cause, maybe someone confirms like a transaction here, but then it turns out that eventually, once we recover, we end up here. We socially end up agreeing to stick with this chain. So the danger is very high, but the safety is also high because this kind of happened at the same time. So the safety decay is very small. And here is the opposite. The danger is low because time has passed. So hopefully people will have seen this. And when I say danger is low, I basically mean you have to make a stronger synchrony assumption, or sorry, you have to, a weaker synchrony assumption gets you that there's no problem. Like if you assume that finalization will like propagate in this time, then this will not be able to affect anything. But safety is also lower because there is this like finality decay kind of, or safety decay. And so that's good, but it only works when we're actually finalizing, because finalizing kind of keeps moving renewing our safety, like baseline safety. Like if we're not finalizing for a while, safety is decaying like all throughout here. Like the anchor for kind of the initial validator set is here. And so yeah, we're kind of losing safety for free in a way, but actually it's not fully for free because we have this inactivity leak mechanism on both of these chains, so that okay, during this time where we're losing safety because we're not finalizing, people are actually getting penalized to some extent for it. So at least you could say one of the points of the inactivity leak, it's not the only one, but like one of the reasons is there. It's also a bit to compensate for this, to say okay, like you can't just reduce safety without paying any price for it, essentially. Yeah, but I mean, basically, the idea would kind of now this gets a bit to what you were saying before about who's getting leaked where, like how does that work? So I can't claim that there is like I think a full story of how like the inactivity leak like fully making sense in like this exact situation, but I think an idea is like okay, imagine like say that we have honest majority and synchrony, so the assumptions of a ebb and flow protocol, and we do have a secure ebb and flow protocol. Now this means that we're gonna be able to have like a sort of stable canonical chain. We're gonna have like a safe and live available chain, so your kind of LMD ghost chain like progressing. That is sort of the anchor for our inactivity leak. Like this chain is the one that everyone will see as canonical, so there's no question of like some other branch being relevant basically. And so the only leak that matters is what happens on this chain. But yeah, so we have honest majority. We might still not finalize because we might not have 2/3. And in this case, basically the adversary, if they obstruct finality, they will surely be leaked on the canonical chain. And in this case, it's kind of well defined because we can say this is the canonical chain because we have this sort of enough assumptions to make sure that the canonical chain is going to stay stable, let's say, and keep growing.
And just to make sure, this inactivity leak reduces your stake but keeps your voting power, or
it reduces both, yeah. Which yeah, it also has consequences then on the validator second position, and so that's also some like I think the full story is not that like I don't think anyone has really like fully thought of how all of these interactions happen, to be honest, because yeah, for example,
does it happen? Do you have like cases where people have leaked?
Yeah, for example, on this testnet that you mentioned, I think at some point the participation was like 5%, and I think it eventually finalized again by literally leaking everyone over the course of months. But it was a testnet. But on mainnet, there's been the inactivity leak active, but only for brief periods of time.
And so, for example, like all the subsampling that you're doing needs to like be re-subsampled based on the inactivity leak that's happening? Like
yeah, so this is kind of naturally happens in the sense that each chain will say, these are my set of committees, and this is based on the RANDAO of that chain, but also on the balances and validator set of the chain. So if you think about the whole block tree, like every like leaf in the block tree has its own view of what the committees are, which is another thing that adds complexity to the whole.
And just to get like a sense, so 32 ETH is like one voting power, and then like how long does it take before I get like 0 voting power?
Yeah, I don't really remember, to be honest. I think it's like on the order of like, let's say a year, but something like on the order of a year. I don't have the exact, I mean, it depends how much like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you're, no one's, yeah, I don't have the number, yeah.
But do you get it back if you vote?
Yeah, if you vote, you just don't get leaked.
So why don't do something more statistical, like say, take 100 votings, the guy has to vote at least 50% of the time.
I mean, it's like, well, I mean, if you do that, you will be leaked 50% of the time, so you only get leaked half of the time.
It's a slash.
No, you say you get it back.
No, you don't get it back. Like, no, you don't get leaked if you participate correctly. But if you do get leaked, you don't get it back.
In every vote.
Yeah, every vote is a chance to.
So if you skip one,
you get leaked like a little bit. No, but you lose like a little bit. It's not like, yeah, it's like a penalty, but it's like a stronger penalty than normal. Okay. Yeah, maybe let's just, I think, skip this. I think it. Yeah, there's a lot of like kind of maybe just this, literally just this one slide. Yeah, I just wanted to tell you like another kind of aspect that's very intricate about reasoning about these like ebb and flow protocols, and that's about the finality gadget specifically. It's the interactions that you get from with so how the finality gadget affects the fork choice, and the specific area where this shows up the most is if you assume that there's been some asynchrony and now you're trying to recover from it. So you still eventually want to be live again, like we're again in the partially synchronous model for the finality gadget. The issue is that in the meantime, weird things could have happened, where, for example, some justification has been, like conflicting justifications have happened, but maybe this one is even only known to the adversary. So for now, it looks to us that this is the canonical chain. But then, for example, the adversary could reveal this and cause a reorg. And then this could also cascade in bigger problems. In general, essentially, I would summarize the problem with normally the interaction works because the way the interaction is that this is safe. So these are like safe things produced by the available protocol. They're put into the finality gadget, and then they're pumped back in as like checkpoints. But they all come from here ultimately. And so when this is safe, the only thing that comes back are things that are already in accordance with this. It's like a checkpoint that you already knew about in some sense. You already had confirmed it. Now, asynchrony breaks this because it breaks the safety of these things. So now you have garbage going into this and then garbage coming out. Like you could have something that isn't actually safe. It comes into here and then comes back as a checkpoint. And that's the kind of precisely what happened in this slide. Like somehow there's been something that is not actually canonical, but it is a checkpoint and then can cause all kinds of trouble to the chain. And so basically a major like difficulty in dealing with this interaction is like breaking this loop. Like once you've gotten into the bad mode, how do you like get out of it and make the interaction go back to like the good one? And that's like, yeah, a major thing in that we're working on as we like work on future protocols. But yeah, just leave with like this image, I guess, as like the biggest like kind of pain point of working with ebb and flow protocols, at least from our perspective. And then yeah, I'll end it off back to Yann.
Thank you. All right, yeah, for the last 15 or 20 minutes or so, I just want to give you a quick, again, probably zooming out a bit again, and now we've heard about all the difficulties or what makes it difficult to design the future of Ethereum consensus. But I'll get a bit into what we're kind of thinking at the moment. And so the best source of information, I think, at the moment is this strawmap.org website that the architecture team with Francesco have put out. And so you'll see the three kind of layers of how Ethereum is currently thinking of execution, data, and consensus. And so I just want to, you can click at all of them. And just to say, okay, this is 2026, 27. You might not see it 28, 29, and like long term. And it's also not like anything set in stone. It's just like kind of the best guess currently. And so I just want to zoom in on the consensus layer, and specifically what kind of pertains to fast finality and changes that pertain to what we talked about today. So it's essentially this kind of lane. And so we already mentioned fast confirmation as a way to make the available chain give like a faster signal. So this could be like a 12-second signal for Ethereum. So that's the kind of ongoing thing, or the what's currently in the pipeline. The next, and then I just want to briefly mention the next kind of three boxes here, which are decoupled consensus, forced slot rounds, which you can think of just like a gradual improvement and then one round finality. So I'll mostly focus on decoupled consensus and one round finality. And all of this is kind of with the end game idea of having like fast slots and finality in seconds, not milliseconds, but like maybe 1 digit or 2 digit seconds. So decoupled consensus. What do we mean by this? So as an overview, but if we talked about LMD Ghost and Casper FFG, which you can we call it Gasper. This is on a high level how it looks like. We have these LMD Ghost blocks that come all 12 seconds, and then all 6.5 minutes we have one of these checkpoints that we can then attempt to finalize. And then you have these 4 seconds for the block and then 8 seconds for a vote. And over this 32 slots, we have to send 1 million times 100 bytes. And so kind of we have two options in a way. The people who designed this, they could have made the voting, for example, short. They could have made the voting shorter, so just send less votes. This would have been nice for block time, but then the epochs would have been longer, okay? And then we would have a longer time to finality. You could do the opposite trade-off, where you can make sure that the whole 1 million validators vote in a single slot. You could have faster finality, but then the block time would be really bad, okay? And so what we mean by, you have this coupling of block production and finality timeline. And what we mean by decoupled consensus is kind of removing this dependency and have the available chain kind of on its own timeline, potentially with like shorter vote time, and the finality gadget on its own time. And so specifically what you could do is you can use the time that previously was not used for sending votes. You can now think of better ways to send these votes around. And also it's more flexible. So over time, maybe as there's less validators because of consolidation, or as there's peer-to-peer improvements, etc., you can kind of reduce this time kind of naturally.
But then it's not on-chain, right?
So these votes can be added on chain. They can be added. So for example, you could still have committees, except now the committees they can decide. So everyone can decide on what to vote here. But even if the vote is sent here, it can still be added to this block potentially. So this is more like a high-level view. And so specifically, Francesco mentioned already, there's Goldfish. So this could become the heartbeats, the replacement for LMD Ghost. And then we could have a finality gadget that we're currently working on. And it could also contain a stability gadget, as Francesco mentioned. But the important idea that I want to mention here is that this heartbeat could be sampled with a VRF. So it could be just very few validators comparatively. Maybe sampled in a way that the largest stakeholders, they always have a seat and always have a vote. And then this would remain the same 1 million validators voting rounds, hopefully decreasing. Oh, I should mention also, because we had this discussion recently, there's also this item here. There's the 128,000 attester cap, a validator cap. That's a controversial item, but potentially something that needs to be done also for post-quantum. I'm going the wrong way. Right. So maybe I won't zoom in too much into Goldfish. Just to say that the nice thing that we would get here is we get a very fast confirmation, so very very fast signal. Already after 2 delta, we can get a secret committee election. As Francesco mentioned, this Goldfish is nice because we can do committees. The secret committee is also nice because we cannot do bribing. Or like the adversary cannot bribe these 512 validators.
And it also would be not biased, unlike Randall.
Yeah, nice. We can fast confirm, and we can rotate this committee at every slot. Then potentially add this asynchrony resilient stabilization gadget. So just for this decoupled consensus, a couple advantages. So might be nice is just that with consolidation we have this flexibility. Networking improvement, as I mentioned, the peer-to-peer team is doing a lot of, they're redesigning ETH P2P. And if one day we want to have privacy solution, this could be added kind of naturally. Also for post-quantum, this adds more flexibility. The components maybe can be swapped later, and especially the available chain is more flexible is better for post-quantum potentially, at least in the short term. But this is a big question mark as well. Maybe with the remaining time. A couple of minutes, okay. Okay.
I think isn't it 15 minutes? What is it now?
We have time?
Yeah,
Okay.
30 minutes, let's say.
Oh, okay. But I mean, it's good to have some maybe time for questions at the end. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, so just briefly mentioning one-round finality, which is a topic that's also pretty close to my heart. We've already heard a lot from Andrew this morning, so I just want to kind of maybe say how it might make sense, or why, from my point of view, I would advocate that Ethereum would also use this. Right. So we have voting rounds. Note that here, this high-level picture starts already with confirmation. So we incur the latency first of all of the block proposal of the confirmation, and then we have this full validators voting rounds, right? With one-round finality, the goal is, okay, we can already finalize after one round. We can finalize after one round. And if you look at it from a current Ethereum perspective, your transaction is going to end up in a block during a certain epoch. There'll be at some point you'll have the checkpoint that's being justified. So then all these votes here will try to justify this checkpoint. And then you have another round for finalization. With one round finality, we could kind of remove this one epoch. The one good thing is that this is because of the synchrony assumption, or like how should I say, the fixed views. Contrary to what we've heard from Alpenglow, where actually the two rounds might be faster than the one round, here we'll always be sure that the one round is always faster. So it actually always shaves off some time. The second thing I would mention is in Ethereum currently we have very high participation, typically 99% of votes. So we could do the trade-off. You mentioned the model with P, so maybe we could set this P, potentially we could set it to quite a small number and still benefit from it. And so not lose too much safety. And the other thing which is interesting and which Vitalik has talked about already, and what he would say, is that actually raising the threshold to finality could be a good thing. So we see it, I would say, as coming from academia, I would say, okay, we want to max out liveness. So we want to have a safety equal liveness as much as we can. So this was kind of interesting to me that actually potentially this is not true, right? So potentially we might want to have less liveness, so go from 2/3 to 5/6. And this can have, there's certain good properties that would come from that. I'll try to list them. So one thing is that's thinking about a minority that might not agree with a fork, or that might not agree with a certain block, because I don't know, there was censorship or something bad happened in that block. That minority can cause a non-finality event, in which case for a long period of time, there's time for there's non-finality and there's potentially time for social consensus to happen before that block is finalized. So that could be one thing. The other thing, we've started this today with talking about bugs and how consensus client bugs can be harmful. If we raise this, we can really try to make sure that at least if one client is correct, then we will never finalize something that's invalid. And the other thing, it's something maybe I recently realized that's maybe not that important, but if you have a higher finality threshold, you could do a second round of voting. So kind of go back to second vote, and then you can actually have higher safety than before. So then maybe if you go to 80%, if you do a second round of voting, you can actually now have 60% accountable safety. Something, that, or even higher potentially. Yeah, so this could be reasons for one-round finality. And how it could look like, now I'm just kind of throwing out random numbers. If one day we get to a voting round of 16 seconds, then cutting this one round saves us, goes maybe from 40 seconds to 24. And something, I don't know, could also be interesting is that, currently we have to think of the worst case networking kind of scenario where we want to have everyone, give everyone time to send a vote. With run-on finality, actually, what we could do is, if someone already has a certificate at this stage, they can already send that certificate around. So here, potentially, you can shave off some more time. Yeah.
Can you give an intuition of why it actually matters to reduce latency from 40 seconds to 16 seconds? I mean, the answer is not entirely obvious to me, right? For very fast chains that are, I don't know, 400 milliseconds, shoving up and going to 350 milliseconds, basically latency scales with money, right? I mean, you have more trades, those people are otherwise trading on centralized exchange, and it's just like pure speculation these days, right? But in your case, 16 seconds is anyway way too high for making high-frequency trading, right? So what is the things that you could do with 16 seconds and that you could not do with 40 seconds?
I think that's a great question. I think there's people thinking about this. We have Ben in our team who's talking to people whether this is worth the effort, I guess. Yeah, I think it's a good question. One answer that one argument, I guess you could say, is that if you, for example, you want to go from one L2 to another, this is the time your capital is kind of inefficient, and maybe there's some. I don't know exactly how much more efficient your capital becomes if you can kind of half the time, but maybe there's some finance reasons there. I don't know exactly how. Probably at the moment, actually, I guess, going from minutes and hours to this would already probably get just most of the way there. So maybe actually that's not even a good argument. Yeah. And maybe I don't know exactly how much it is for like L2s to kind of what their kind of limit is to kind of work together in a way that they can go through Ethereum, and kind of what is acceptable time to finality they would have to for interop. That's kind of like a good UX, kind of provides a good UX between the L2s. But yeah, I think L2s currently, my understanding is that L2s are the ones that push the most for this and bridges. Yeah. I don't know if you have other insights.
Yeah, maybe just I think similar thing to the L2 interop kind of case. I think you can think of L2s also just as users, and I think for maybe regular users a similar consideration applies, where if you're gonna have to wait 60 seconds, you might just use like whatever kind of bridge that where someone gives you like a confirmation of some kind, whereas maybe if it's 10 seconds you're willing, like I've definitely not looked into this, done like user research. There's, as Yann said, like now there's people actually doing this, so hopefully we get better answers to who exactly cares about what threshold. But yeah, I think the hope is that maybe a lot of this like cross-chain activity can become safer because it becomes more acceptable to wait for whatever time we provide, as opposed to using like things that don't have that level of safety, whether it is for L2s or for direct users or.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to, if we have some time, I can just talk a little bit about some options in the one-round protocols. Andrew this morning mostly talked about, I think, of the case where we have, either 5f+1 or 3f+1. And he mentioned the model where we have this p that can vary. So just to say that this is an option, and so here, for example, we could have a fast path that only works when we have 100% of the votes, and otherwise we would go for the slow path, and in that case we could actually maintain the full safety. The Minimit example, I guess, is this, where there's only is a kind of, I would say, pure protocol where we always one run finalize. Here, this is one of the instances that I mentioned at the beginning, where I thought, oh, we could just do this, but then because of the interaction between the available chain and the finality chain, actually this would not be safe, because we want to make sure that an adversary that has, let's say, 40% voting power cannot notarize, or in our language, justify a block on its own, right? So here, if we had this this mini QC, a 40% adversary could kind of rework the whole chain, and so this is something we would not want. So that's why we have been working on, together with Itai and Neil that are here, on kind of different trade-offs and different parameterizations in these models, of like trying to think of, trying to think of what could work also in this setting. So I think that's, there's one slide that I added yesterday because I was talking to Itai, and it's just an attempt, okay? I think he made a very good point that we should have maybe try to have a list of requirements that we would want. And so this is just a first very first attempt at my understanding of some requirements that we would want. Okay, so we talked a lot about the 50% safety under synchrony. So this is for sure one. So I tried to put them in red, that are the more safety properties. We have accountable safety. Here we've seen with one round, maybe it's actually not clear if it's actually has to be 33%. It could also be lower. It could also be higher if there's adding some accountability gadget. Then Francesco talked a lot about accountable liveness, recovering with an inactivity leak, potentially recovering from partitions, things like this. Then not having downtime, being able to tolerate sleepiness, crash faults, and so I would say this kind of falls into the dynamic availability bucket. In terms of networking, mostly, I think the optimistic responsiveness, for example, is not something that Ethereum would ever consider. Then there's this idea of having a minority that can have a lot of influence on the chain. So maybe higher liveness threshold, or thinking about the user experience of a minority forking the chain, of what can happen there. And then these are more the performance buckets, and of course low latency and fast blocks, as was discussed many times. But I added kind of the limitations there. So a lot of validators. Potentially, networking constraints, potentially post-quantum for latency. And for fast block, one of the constraints that I'm aware of is ZK VMs that are also going to come rather soon. And so, creating the ZK proof is going to add time to the slot. So potentially, these slots cannot even go down too much in time. I think that's kind of my attempt at a recap.
Yeah, I would add what we discussed before, asynchronous resilience, no collapses of the dynamic. Okay, sorry.
So if we want, I guess this kind of follows from having dynamic availability. We have a quick plug. We have a new website that's up. We're trying to add open problems here. Maybe you should add a new section requirements as we've established. Happy to go for questions.
Let's take a couple of questions at least. We have some.
I don't know if you already said this, but I'm curious why you said optimistic responsiveness is something you never think about.
I think we have discussed it at least, but my understanding is that the validator in Australia, that was already mentioned this week, the validator in Australia should always have the opportunity to participate and get the same amount of rewards as other validators. Yeah. And my understanding is that with optimistic responsiveness, this might be hindered. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you, first thanks for the presentation, I don't know if any of you work with the P2P layer, but I would like to understand what's the goal to be P2P. You are not implementing is a spec, right? But the idea is to be, are you implementing it?
I'm not implementing it. No.
Okay, but like that P2P is a spec, right? Everyone implements. Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea is to create a new spec.
Yeah.
But the idea is to go to something specific to Ethereum, like Dev P2P, that's very specific, or something generic like big.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe one part of the answer is that we work with people that work on this. We're definitely not driving this in any way. There is this person specifically, Raul, which is kind of the main driver for this. And yeah, his goal, as I understand it, is definitely to make, I think it's kind of two goals. Like one is to have a P2P layer that's actually tailored to Ethereum. And so tailored to Ethereum and not to to every use case, which is more like the libp2p kind of situation. And even within that, Ethereum has, the consensus layer has a bunch of different use cases that differ quite a lot. Like blocks are not the same as attestations. Blobs are very different. If you have like a lot of small messages, it's very different from one big message. So that's also kind of introducing like different tools that are actually for the jobs that they're supposed to do, as opposed to just like gossips up. Like everything is just gossiped in the same way. So I think it's these two things, yeah. And I mean, on the more specific side, one goal is also just to introduce erasure coding to the block propagation. So that's like, yeah. One.
I mean, P2P only has the protocols for Ethereum, right? They are essentially hard coded, and P2P is super generic. So yeah. So you're going to the direction of that P2P.
I mean, that's, again, I don't know. I'm not in charge of the networking direction, but that's at least what the direction has been.
Okay, so let's thank the speakers again and thank all the speakers of today.